with the rich odour of roses, and when the light summer wind stirred amidst the trees of the garden, there came through the open door the heavy scent of the lilac, or the more delicate perfume of the pink-flowering thorn. From the corner of the divan of Persian saddle-bags on which he was lying, smoking, as was his custom, innumerable cigarettes, Lord Henry Wotton could just catch the gleam of the honey-sweet and honey-coloured blossoms of a laburnum, whose tremulous branches seemed hardly able to bear the burden of a beauty so flame-like as theirs, and now and then the fantastic shadows of birds in flight flitted across the long tussore silk curtains that were stretched in front of the huge window, producing a kind of momentary Japanese effect, and making him think of those pallid, jade-faced painters of Tokyo, who, through the medium of an art that is necessarily immobile, seek to convey the sense of swiftness and motion. The sullen murmur of the bees, shouldering their way through the long unmown grass, or circling with monotonous insistence round the dusty gilt horns of the straggling woodbine, seemed to make the stillness more oppressive. The dim roar of London was like the bourdon note of a distant organ. In the centre of the room, clamped to an upright easel, stood the full-length portrait of a young man of extraordinary personal beauty, and in front of it, some little distance away, was sitting the artist himself, Basil Hallward, whose sudden disappearance some years ago caused at the time such public excitement, and gave rise to so many strange conjectures. As the painter looked at the gracious and comely form he had so skilfully mirrored in his art, a smile of pleasure passed across his face, and seemed about to linger there. But he suddenly started up, and, closing his eyes, placed his fingers upon the lids, as though he sought to imprison within his brain some curious dream from which he feared he might awake.
"It is your best work, Basil, the best thing you have ever done,"
said Lord Henry languidly.
"You must certainly send it next year to the Grosvenor. The Academy is too large and too vulgar. Whenever I have gone there, there have either been so many people that I have not been able to see the pictures, which was dreadful, or so many pictures that I have not been able to see the people, which was worse. Oh, the Grosvenor is really the only place."
"I don't think I shall send it anywhere,"
he answered, tossing his head back in that odd way that used to make his friends laugh at him at Oxford.
"No, I won't send it anywhere."
Lord Henry elevated his eyebrows and looked at him in amazement through the thin blue wreaths of smoke that curled up in such fanciful whorls from his heavy opium-tainted cigarette.
"Not send it anywhere? My dear fellow, why? Have you any reason? Oh, what odd chaps you painters are! You do anything in the world to gain a reputation. As soon as you have one, you seem to want to throw it away. Oh, it is silly of you. For there's only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about. A portrait like this would set you far above all the young men in England, and make the old men quite jealous, if old men are ever capable of any emotion."
"I know you will laugh at me,"
he replied,
"but I really can't exhibit it. I have put too much of myself into it."
Lord Henry stretched himself out on the divan and laughed.
"Yes, I knew you would, but it is quite true all the same."
"Too much of yourself in it? Upon my word, Basil, I didn't know you were so vain. And I really can't see any resemblance between you, with your rugged, strong face and your coal-black hair, and this young Adonis, who looks as if he was made out of ivory and rose-leaves. Why, my dear Basil, he is a Narcissus, and you—well, of course, you have an intellectual expression and all that. But beauty, real beauty, ends where an intellectual expression begins. Intellect is in itself a mode of exaggeration, and destroys the harmony of any face. The moment one sits down to think, one becomes all nose or all forehead, or something horrid. Look at the successful men in any of the learned professions, how perfectly hideous they are! Oh, except, of course, in the church, but then in the church they don't think. A bishop keeps on saying at the age of 80 what he was told to say when he was a boy of 18, and as a natural consequence he always looks absolutely delightful. Your mysterious young friend, whose name you have never told me, but whose picture really fascinates me, never thinks, I feel quite sure of that. He is some brainless, beautiful creature, who should be always here in winter when we have no flowers to look at, and always here in summer when we want something to chill our intelligence. Don't flatter yourself, Basil. You are not in the least like him.
You don't understand me, Harry,
answered the artist.
Of course I am not like him. I know that perfectly well. Indeed, I should be sorry to look like him. You shrug your shoulders. I'm telling you the truth. There is a fatality about all physical and intellectual distinction, the sort of fatality that seems to dog through history the faltering steps of kings. It is better not to be different from one's fellows. They neither bring ruin upon others, nor ever receive it from alien hands. Your rank and wealth, Harry, my brains, such as they are, my art, whatever it may be worth, Dorian Gray's good looks, we shall all suffer for what the gods have given us. Suffer terribly.
Dorian Gray, is that his name?
asked Lord Henry, walking across the studio towards Basil Hallward.
Yes, that is his name. I didn't intend to tell it to you.
Oh, but why not?
Oh, I can't explain. When I like people immensely, I never tell their names to anyone. It is like surrendering a part of them. I've grown to love secrecy. It seems to be the one thing that can make modern life mysterious or marvelous to us. The commonest thing is delightful if one only hides it. When I leave town now, I never tell people where I am going. If I did, I would lose all my pleasure. It is a silly habit, I dare say, but somehow it seems to bring a great deal of romance into one's life. I suppose you think me awfully foolish about it.
Not at all,
answered Lord Henry.
Not at all, my dear Basil. You seem to forget that I am married, and the one charm of marriage is that it makes a life of deception absolutely necessary for both parties. I never know where my wife is, and my wife never knows what I am doing. When we meet, we do meet occasionally, when we dine out together or go down to the Duke's, we tell each other the most absurd stories with the most serious faces. My wife is very good at it, much better, in fact, than I am. She never gets confused over her dates, and I always do. But when she does find me out, she makes no row at all. I sometimes wish she would, but she merely laughs at me.
I hate the way you talk about your married life, Harry,
said Basil Hallward, strolling towards the door that led into the garden.
I believe that you are really a very good husband, but that you are thoroughly ashamed of your own virtues.
There's no question, Basil, it's the best thing you've ever done. You'll have to send it to the Grosvenor. The Academy is too large and too vulgar. Whenever I've gone there have either been so many people that I've not been able to see the pictures, which was dreadful, or so many pictures that I've not been able to see the people, which was worse. The Grosvenor's really the only place.
I don't think I'll send it anywhere. No, I shan't send it anywhere.
My dear fellow, why? What an odd lot you painters are. You do anything in the world to gain a reputation, and then as soon as you've got one, you seem to want to throw it away.
I knew you'd laugh at me. It's just simply that I can't exhibit it. I put too much of myself into it.
You flatter yourself, my dear Basil. I don't see any resemblance between you and this remarkable creature. Real beauty ends where intellectual expression begins, which is yours. Intellect itself is a mode of exaggeration. It quite spoils the harmony of any face. You become all nose, or all forehead, or something horrid. Look at the successful men in any of the learned professions, except, of course, in the church. But then in the church they don't think. A bishop keeps on saying at the age of 80 what he was told to say as a boy at the age of 18. So he's inclined to look fairly delightful. I'm sure the mysterious young fellow in that picture illustrates that. No, Basil, you don't resemble him in the least.
As a matter of fact, I should be sorry to look like him. You know, it's best not to be too different. The ugly and the stupid have the best of it in this world. They can sit at their ease and gape at the play. Your rank and wealth, Harry. My art, whatever that may be worth or not. Dorian Gray's looks, we shall all suffer for what the gods have loaded us with.
Dorian Gray. So that's his name.
Yes, I didn't mean to tell you.
But why not?
People I like, I never give their names. It's like giving them up. I've come to love secrecy. Do you know, it seems to be the one thing that can begin to make life better. I never tell people where I've gone to. I suppose you think that's absurd.
Not at all, my dear Basil. You seem to forget that I am married. And the one charm of marriage is that it makes a life of deception absolutely necessary for both parties. I never know where my wife is, and my wife never knows what I am doing. We tell each other the most absurd stories with the most serious faces. My wife's very good at it. Much better, in fact, than I am.
You know, it's my belief that you're really a very good husband, but that you're thoroughly ashamed of your virtues. Your cynicism, Harry, is simply a pose.
Being natural is simply a pose, and the most irritating pose I know. Oh, do let's go outside. It's so stuffy in here. Basil, I want you to explain to me why you don't want to exhibit Dorian Gray's picture. I want the real reason.
I told you the real reason.
No. You said it was because you put too much of yourself into it, which is childish.
Harry, I think that every portrait that is painted with feeling is a portrait of the artist and not the sitter. He is merely the accident, the occasion.
I can believe anything provided that it's quite incredible.
Well, simply, 2 months ago I went to a crush at Lady Brandon's. Well, you know how we artists have to show ourselves in society every now and then, just to remind the public that we exist at all. Well, I'd been there about 10 minutes, and I suddenly became conscious of somebody looking at me. I turned around and I saw Dorian Gray for the first time. Our eyes met. And I can only tell you that a curious sensation of terror came over me. And something seemed to tell me that I was on the verge of some crisis in my life. I turned away to get out of the room. It wasn't conscience, but cowardice of some kind.
Conscience and cowardice are really the same thing, Basil. Conscience is simply the trade name of the firm, that's all.
I don't believe that, Harry, and I don't believe that you do either. Well, whatever it was, I tried to get out of the room. And then suddenly, I came face to face with this young man and his personality. We were quite close by this time, and I asked Lady Brandon to introduce me.
And how did she explain this extraordinary fellow? She generally treats her guests exactly like an auctioneer treats his goods. Either explains them completely away, or tells one everything about them except what one wants to know.
Well, you are rather hard on her, Harry.
My dear friend, she tried to found a salon, only succeeded in opening a restaurant. How could one admire her? But tell me, what did she eventually say?
Oh, something like, I don't know what he actually does. I don't think he does anything. Oh, yes, he plays the piano. Or is it the violin, Mr. Gray? Well, of course, we both started laughing. And we seemed to be friends right away.
Laughter isn't at all a bad beginning for a friendship, and it's by far the best ending for one.
You don't know what friendship is, Harry. Or what enmity is, for that matter. You like everyone. That is to say, you're indifferent to everyone.
I choose my friends for their good looks, my acquaintances for their good characters, and my enemies for their good intellects. A man can't be too careful in his choice of enemies. I haven't one that's a fool. They're all men of some intellectual power, and consequently they all appreciate me. But tell me more about Dorian Gray.
He's absolutely necessary to my work. At the moment, almost daily. He's much more than a model or a sitter. I tell you, Harry, the work that I have done with him is the best work of my life.
Basil, this is extraordinary. I must see him.
He's simply an inspiration to me. You may see nothing in him. I think that I shall see everything, that's all.
Then why won't you exhibit the portrait?
Because there could seem to certain shallow prying eyes a certain artistic idolatry. We live in a time, Harry, when people think of art as a form of autobiography. I don't want that for him, or for myself.
Is he fond of you?
He likes me, I think. Though now and then he does seem to take a real delight in giving me pain. I flatter him.
Perhaps you will tire quicker than he will. Genius lasts longer than beauty.
No, I won't tire, Harry. You can't feel what I feel. You change too often.
Those who are always faithful know only the trivial side of love. It's the faithless who know its tragedies. Ah, I've just remembered.
What?
The name.